Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Deconversionists with co-hosts Elliot Christofferson and Alan Bondar, the Unraveler. So good to have you back with us today. I am going to try.
Good to be here.
I'm going to try to predict what we're talking about today, Elliot. I predict we're talking about prophecy. How'd I do?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Get out! Is that what you want to talk about?
Now you should have wrote that down in a book first, though. That would have been far more impressive.
It would have been. It would have been, especially since I actually nailed the episode and everything. That's pretty good. But nobody's going to believe me now because I didn't put it in a book.
I know. It's too bad.
Oh, but you know what we could do? Somewhere's about 80 years from now, somebody can write it in a book, and then they can say that I prophesied it, and it happened. And it'll go down in history as prophecy.
There we go.
In fact,
and you will be seen as a god.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that's what happened with the Bible anyway.
Apparently, that's all you need to prove your deity is to prophesy something and have it come true.
Yes, it would seem so.
Because what is the purpose of prophecy if not to prove divine authority? Like I would like to ask a Christian that, like, what the heck is the point of prophecy? What does it actually do for us?
That is a really good question. I mean, like, if you think about it, if God needs prophecy to help people know he exists, what is he doing? Like, I don't get that. Why don't you just tell everybody, hey, I'm here? Why do you need prophecy to make this happen?
Or if it's to alert us about some future events, why do we need to know if we're just, humans? I mean, was it Jesus that said no man knows the hour of his coming? Well, then why would we need to know he's coming at all? Like, if it is prophecy to alert us that something is going to take place, well, why doesn't God just do it? Like, right. What are we? We're just ants here. Why do we need to know what God's agenda is?
And let's say that, for the sake of argument, okay, God is telling us future events because for whatever reason he loves us and wants us to know certain things better for us or whatever. Okay, all that's fine and good, but isn't that assuming you've already proven the existence of God and that he is the one causing these prophecies and telling you things? Like, prophecy doesn't prove a God exists. Prophecy is the result of the proof that a God exists who is now prophesying things to help you know the future. So you still, even if people have predicted things and predicted them accurately, let's just say that that's happened and they're prophesied 100% and boom, boom, boom. That still doesn't prove that God had anything to do with it. People might just be prophesying correctly, or it could be some other being or something behind it, or aliens. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with God.
Well, unfortunately, this is what I call a first-line argument or a defense of Christianity that believers use when they're talking to an atheist or an unbeliever, trying to prove to them that the Bible is, in fact, the authoritative word of God. They trot out the prophecy defense and use it as a proof that the Bible has to be supernatural because it predicts things, and then those things came true. So whatever the purpose of prophecy is, its real world function in Christianity is to act as an evidence for the supernatural. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I didn't know you were looking
for a
response to that. I thought you were going to keep going. I predicted that you were going to keep going, and man, that prophecy.
And you were wrong. Yeah.
I'm 1 for 1 so far. Let's see how this goes. Wait, I think if you fail, you get stoned, right? That's the law.
Maybe we're stoned right now, and that's why this is so difficult today. Yeah.
Could be.
Now that we've recovered from the dead air and the blank stares, let's try this again. We didn't prepare very much today.
No, we never do.
The Sunday debate wore both of us out, so we're still recovering.
I probably wore you out more than me, but it was fun.
Anyway, we need to examine prophecy a little bit, because a Christian will throw that out there as a proof, and then they will simply make the claim that, well, the Bible, predicted this or that. Usually it's about Jesus, and then that thing came true. But what I think they're doing is they're being too casual about it. They're not examining a few different things, like what would actually make a good prophecy. Because if we can both agree on some criteria beforehand on what would actually make a good prophecy, then we can actually go to the source material, and we can see if we find that criteria in it to demonstrate whether it's actually a good prophecy or not. So that's like a scientific method, is instead of making your determination beforehand, you create your rules first, and then you apply them to the study or the material and see what you can draw from the actual data. So if we were to agree on some criteria first, what would make a good prophecy? And I'll just ask you that first. What do you think would make a good prophecy?
Well, let's go one at a time and just see if we can build a list here. I'd say the first thing is that it has to be specific, not general. That would be a big deal, because I think it's easy to just make a generalization like tomorrow the sun's going to rise. Okay. I mean, anybody can predict that. And in all likelihood, that's going to happen. Sure. Is there a small possibility that the universe will explode tomorrow and there's no sun? Sure. But if that happened, I don't think anybody would care anyway, because we'd all be dead. So it wouldn't matter. But yeah, I mean, it's just making declarative statements that everybody would assume anyway. It's really a prophecy. Like, for example, from the Bible, Matthew 16, 27 and 28, some of you standing here will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. There's people who try to argue that, Christians try to argue, well, Jesus was talking about his transfiguration, which would have literally just taken place a few days later. I think it was like 6 days later, if I'm not mistaken. Well, the odds of some of them still being alive 6 days later is pretty good. So yeah. Some of you standing here, that's not really a prophecy. Now, to say that that's going to take place 40 years later, now you're talking a generation. There's a good chance that that's a prophecy and Jesus had to fulfill it. That's one of the reasons why I became a full preterist, because that passage didn't make sense anymore in a transfiguration context.
Well, you're getting ahead of yourself on the criteria. You said the first thing should be specific. Okay, because then you got into one I actually have in the future here. So you're back on the ball, because you're prophesying again accurately, because my first criteria is specificity. And it makes me wonder if you didn't read that in a book, because that's actually straight out of my chapter in my book on prophecy. Is my first criteria is to be specific. So you are back to 1 for 1.
Back to one. 2 for 1. I hope I'm 2 for 1.
Well, two. Well, we'll give you 2, but
I'm hoping. Well, we can negate that second one. So
I'm curious if I were to ask you what the second criteria of a good prophecy is, if you're going to hit this one too.
Ooh, the second one, I would say,
because you kind of touched on it for a second there.
Let me think. I touched on it. It's a good hint.
A little bit, yeah. Something about the likelihood of people still being alive.
Right. You're going to have to give it so we don't spend any more time just
saying. Yeah, exactly. Ideally, prophecy should have a time restriction. So if you give prophecy too long to come true, eventually, whatever it might be, is likely going to happen in some way that can be interpreted as a prophecy.
I got you.
But we want it to be in such a short amount of time where it's unlikely that it would have happened on its own. So you want to restrict the time a little bit. So if I predict that some random event is going to happen, let's say the fall of a country. We'll take the biblical prophecy of the fall of Tyre. I forget which book it's found, but there was a prophecy in the Old Testament that the city of Tyre would fall, and that it would be Nebuchadnezzar that did it. Now, let's take Nebuchadnezzar out of it. Let's just say the city is going to fall, because eventually the city did kind of fall, but it wasn't to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, if we don't put a time limit on that, or a time restriction, and we give it like 1,000 years, eventually every city in the world in some way, shape, or form does fall to a foreign invasion or a foreign army. So you have erased the supernatural aspect of the prophecy because cities fall, and they fall a lot, especially in the ancient world. Now, if God had predicted in the Old Testament that Tyre is going to fall next week, and at the time there was no army, actively marching on Tyre, and what do you know, the next week the city falls, that would be a very powerful evidence of a supernatural aspect. So first is it's got to be specific, not vague, and then it's got to have a time restriction. So you ready to go for number 3?
Do it.
This is a really obvious one.
Okay.
Self-fulfilling. Prophecies cannot be self-fulfilling. There cannot be someone actively working to fulfill the prophecy, because if there is, then God's hand is not in it. It's a human fulfillment. For example, the nation of Israel. A lot of Christians point to Israel and say, well, Israel is a nation again today. It's a fulfillment of prophecy that they would come back together as a nation. True, and that would be unique, except for the fact that people worked to make that happen. They worked very hard to make that happen. God did not do that for them. God did not intervene and create the new nation of Israel and bring everybody back. He didn't. There was nothing supernatural about it. That was handed to the Jews after World War II by the British, who controlled Palestine at the time. Now, sure, they had to fight for it, but that was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But
I think, comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So it would, by self-fulfilling or not self-fulfilling, it would have to be something that otherwise would not naturally happen without the intervention of a supernatural force, something that is not natural. So an example that's obvious, you go to a restaurant and you order a steak, and lo and behold, the steak comes out. Did you prophesy that a steak would come out?
Right.
No, it's self-fulfilling in a sense, because it's already something that's naturally going to happen. But if I went to a steak restaurant and, I don't know, ordered, I can't even think of a word with it, but just maybe was very vague in my order. Be like, today you will bring me something that I desperately need, that God, has told you that you're going to bring out, and everybody knows that I desperately need this thing, whatever it is, a lung, whatever. It's just some random freaking thing and I've told everybody knew about this beforehand, except this one dude, and then like out comes along and be like, that would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, let me tweak it just a little bit for you, help you out there. It would be like going to a restaurant, because you actually touched on my fourth criteria, my fourth and final, which is the prophecy should be unlikely to happen. So let's say you go to a steak restaurant and you order ostrich meat. This is highly unlikely. You've gone to a steak restaurant, but you have prophesied that they're going to bring you ostrich meat with your order. And lo and behold, out comes actual ostrich meat, an exotic meat in a landlocked area in a steakhouse. Like, highly unlikely, but you prophesied it. You are demonstrating your supernatural ability to predict an unlikely future rather than the likely future of, hey, I ordered a steak, prophesied it would happen, out it comes. So I don't know if that helps the analogy a little bit.
No, that's good. And assuming that they didn't have it on the menu or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole point. They don't have it on the menu.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's why it's supernatural.
Right. Yes.
So we got 4 criteria. First, we have to agree that and I'm sure what we want, our goal here is to get the Christian who wants to use prophecy as a proof to agree with us on the premises before we examine the scripture to see if it makes sense. So I would imagine that most Christians would agree that the purpose of prophecy is to demonstrate the power of God. I'm fine with that. And then we hopefully we could agree that a prophecy has to be specific, not vague enough where anything could apply to it, because we really want to see the power of God here. Secondly, it has a time restriction. It's not like 1,000 years to come true. We want to see some indication that this is supernatural. So, and third, not self-fulfilling. We don't want human involvement in this, or else they ruin it. They spoil the experiment. And fourth, it has to be unlikely, because if it's something that's likely, like it's just a mundane aspect of life. Like, so what? Like, if I prophesy that I am gonna like meet someone today, and then I run into a stranger, well, how unlikely is that? But if I say I'm gonna run into an old friend today who I haven't seen in 20 years, and then it happens, like, one is likely, one is unlikely. So if we can get everybody to agree on those 5 things, the purpose of the prophecy.
Sorry, go back to number 4 for just a moment, because I think that one still needs a little bit of clarity.
The unlikely part?
No, was that an unlikely? Whichever one was about human involvement.
You self-fulfilling.
Yeah, self-fulfilling. So let's clarify that some more, because I can imagine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Because God uses people to fulfill prophecies. Yeah.
Right.
It would self-fulfilling, as in the human is aware of the original prophecy and he is taking it upon himself to work to fulfill that, rather than, God doing it, I guess. Okay. But you want God to use people who are unaware, so they're not like, getting involved and messing with it. They did it because the Spirit came upon them and they were unaware.
So, question about that one that I can imagine somebody asking. At least this is all of a sudden a question for me. Wouldn't then it be theoretically possible that every prophecy ends up becoming nullified, because since it was prophesied here in time, somebody read that prophecy and then helps fulfill it to make sure it happens?
So I must have put that in a different chapter of my book. Oh no, actually, I'm cheating here. I've got my book open.
That's all right.
To refresh my memory of my past.
I like to do that all the time.
Back when I had studied these things and was much sharper on them, and before I forgot everything.
Me too.
Prophecies cannot. Maybe this is the 5th criteria. Prophecies cannot be just stories. You cannot include the prophecy and the fulfillment of the prophecy in the same writing, in the same story, at the same time. One has to come before the other one, or the prophecy has to come before the fulfillment, and the fulfillment itself can't simply be a story about it being fulfilled. You have to be able to demonstrate that that fulfillment actually happened in the real world. So how this would play out is, for example, we can go back to that prophecy about the ancient city of Tyre being destroyed. We have a historical record that proves that Tyre was attacked by Nebuchadnezzar, and that eventually the city did fall to an army in the future. Like, we know for a fact that event took place. Well, we know for a very high probability that event took place. It's not just a story that Tyre fell and therefore the prophecy was fulfilled. But when you take that same criteria and you go like into the New Testament, where we have lots of prophecies about Jesus being fulfilled in the New Testament, and they were written in the Old, and then they're fulfilled in the New. The problem is, when we get to those fulfillments, we do not know, we cannot prove, there is no way to demonstrate that those stories of Jesus fulfilling prophecy in the Gospels actually took place. The writers of those Gospels could very well have made up those stories about Jesus fulfilling prophecy and put them in the Gospel. And we have no way to tell the difference between Jesus actually doing those things and someone writing about Jesus doing those things and making that up. Like, if you have a way to tell whether in history Jesus actually rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, and the writer of the gospel didn't simply make up a story about Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem, you tell me what your process is, because I don't know how to determine whether that's a real historical event. Therefore, that prophecy is impossible to prove to being a real prophecy, because I have a story.
Yeah. Pause on that prophecy for just a moment. Then let's just say hypothetically that it did happen, and we could, guarantee it happened. First of all, that's a very general, not very specific prophecy. Somebody rides a donkey. I bet you there were thousands of people riding donkeys. I mean, that's not that big of a deal.
Or he could have known about the prophecy and got on the donkey to make it a self-fulfilling event.
That's the next thing I'm going with is, then that was the point I was making, is is if all prophecy is made prior to the event happening, can't anybody take advantage of that and say, "Oh, look, I'm going to do this," and then they become the fulfiller of the prophecy? So it's almost like that qualifier is almost an unnecessary qualifier, simply because there's no way to tell whether or not somebody read the prophecy and fulfilled it, or if they were completely ignorant of it and fulfilled it. How do you know? You can never know.
Yeah. So these are good reasons why every single prophecy that you find in the Bible, whether it's been prophesied or whether it's been fulfilled, it fails under scrutiny.
It does.
If I were,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I were a Christian arguing with somebody about the reliability of the Bible, I would not use prophecy, because it falls apart in too many aspects. Like, the book fulfills the book, unless it's something in the historical record. But the vast majority of the prophecies in the Bible are not found in the historical record. The fall of the city of Tyre is unique because we actually know what happened. I don't want to get too deep into that, but Christians will point to that as being a proof of a fulfilled prophecy. But the problem with Tyre, because I do need to address it because I mentioned it, the problem with Tyre is that the writer specifically said that Nebuchadnezzar himself would destroy the city. But Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to the city and eventually gave up and pulled back because he was not able to take it. So Tyre remained standing after Nebuchadnezzar's war. You can make up some excuses about it, but like, that's just the historical record. Like, we know that prophecy failed. Anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, all the prophecies are nullified for one of the 5 reasons that you gave, all of the requirements for it to be prophecy. Most of them, if they were stated in the past, they're so generic that yes, it would have been easy for a guy named Jesus to come on the scene, read the text, and go around fulfilling all these prophecies. There's just not much to. There's not a lot of detail. There's not a lot of specificity to any of them, nor do any of them, or most of them, I should say, have the timeline effectiveness that you were talking about. They're not reasonably stated within a certain amount of time. It's just like, oh, someday, like even going to the New Testament, thinking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Someday, this is going to happen, right? There's actually no timeline that says it's going to happen, in AD 70. There's no specificity. Good grief, that's a tough word today. Of when that was going to happen, just that it's going to happen sometime soon. I mean, like you said earlier, cities were being conquered all the time, and not to mention, by the time Mark was written, which is the earliest gospel, there's debate as to whether it was even written before 70 AD. So it could have been,
right.
The prophecy could have been put in Jesus's mouth anyhow. But even if hypothetically it was written before 70 AD, that still could have been put in Jesus' mouth. But, to record all of those things right before the destruction of Jerusalem, because it's usually dated anywhere from like 65 to 80, Mark's gospel, depending on where you place it. But even if it was written, the prophet, it's so vague. It's just this city's going to fall, wars, rumors of wars. The disciples, you're going to go and you're going to be flogged in the cities. Well, okay. But remember, if you're writing this practically a generation after Jesus was even on the scene, it's like you're already talking about things that already happened. Sure, it looks like prophecy because Jesus said it before it happened, but you're recording it later. So there's all kinds of problems there too. Either you're remembering it wrong, that Jesus didn't say it because it's, reconsolidated memory, or you're remembering it right, and you're just inserting little details here and there to make Jesus sound better than he actually did. Because, I mean, most of the stuff in Mark 13 there doesn't give much detail about anything. It's just very, very generic type stuff that can happen to anybody. And we know Jerusalem fell. So it's like, okay, wow, Jesus must have prophesied it. Yeah. Not really. He made a general statement. He ordered a stake, essentially.
So I'm sure that if there's any Christians watching this, they are frantically, reciting to the camera their favorite prophecy from the Old Testament and how Jesus fulfilled it. So it's fair that we actually touch on at least one passage to try to explain how it fails. So Isaiah 53 is one of the big ones. I know there's another in Psalms that I believe it talks about him being nailed to a tree. But I'm going to explain Isaiah 53 under my criteria, and then you can go ahead, and if you're an intelligent enough person, you can just apply that same standard to the one in Psalms, and you tell me. So Isaiah 53, in part here, you find the but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. So the gospel story, it's kind of getting a little confused here, so I didn't plan this out ahead of time. But let's just take the stripes part. So Jesus was whipped, according to the story, and his back was essentially flayed by the Romans. So his stripes, they're trying to make the connection between that in Isaiah and the fact that actually happened to him. And if you go further down, it says,
what verse are you on?
I am in
Isaiah 53,
verse 5.
5. Okay, thanks.
Was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. So essentially, he was beaten, he was bruised, and he was whipped, and therefore, that's the gospel message that our sins were healed through his suffering. Then you go down here, so we get more specific. Maybe I went to the wrong chapter.
Well, Isaiah 53 is the one about Jesus, yeah. Well, supposedly.
I should have read this beforehand. I'm looking really bad right now because I think I went to the wrong passage I wanted to cover. But so I'll just paraphrase what I'm actually talking about. Whether it's Isaiah 53 or whether it's Psalms, it's talking about something happening to that person. The problem is that these passages are not specific. They're not talking about exactly who this is supposed to be happening to. Was it supposed to be happening to the Messiah? Was it supposed to be happening to Jesus? It's extremely vague, because if you go to the top of Isaiah 53, the first verse says, "Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of the dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire of him." Where does that explain who they're talking about? I have no idea what that means. Is this some random guy? Is this the king? Is this the Messiah? Is this the Son of God? Like, it's just too vague.
Right.
If this is a prophecy about Jesus Christ, I mean, at the very least, tell us it's about the Messiah. And a really good prophecy would say this is about Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, the prophecy is not very specific. It could be about literally anybody.
And it doesn't. And then we apply the rest of the criteria, which is what I wanted to do here. Where is the time limit on this? Is there any time restriction? When is this supposed to happen? So right. we've got all the W's of who, what, when, where, why, and how, and you find none of that in this passage. I don't know who it's talking about. I don't know when this is supposed to happen. I don't know where this is supposed to happen.
Right, and it's easy to retrofit it. You go, oh look, Jesus fits all this criteria. It must have been him, and it's like, wow, that's random.
Right. It completely fails, because I could read that. It just, as a stranger to the Bible, I could read that passage, and I'm going to walk away having no idea what I just read. It's talking about some guy being afflicted or being mistreated, but I don't know who, when, why or how this is happening.
It's similar
So you
to
can,
the attempts made to argue that the Shroud of Turin is proof of Jesus, right? So it's been debunked, but even if hypothetically you could prove that it was the only possibility was that the cloth is the imprint of the resurrection, like there's only one way that could possibly imprint on a cloth like that. You still cannot prove that that's Jesus. It could be somebody else that got resurrected that we have no evidence for whatsoever as well. As it stands, we have no evidence that Jesus rose from the dead outside the Bible. So how do we know? It could have been, maybe there were 50,000 resurrections taking place that we just didn't know about during that first century. Who knows? And if that's the case, then you have a cloth here, but you're retrofitting it to try to say, hey, look, it has to be Jesus because we just want it to be. And that's essentially what's happening with Isaiah 53. It's like, oh, look, this prophecy took place. It's describing details that, for all intents and purposes, are so generic, could have been anybody, but Jesus fulfills them. See, it must be Jesus. He's the only one that Isaiah 53 could be talking about. And no, it's not.
well, help me out here, because the passage that I was looking for, the reason I can't find it is the one where they cast lots for his garments. We know that the Roman soldiers casted lots for
Psalm 22. I think.
Is that in Psalm? Okay, that's why when I got to the end here of 53, I did not see that. I just saw something that says, like, he shall divide the spoil with the strong. I'm like, well, that's not the division I'm thinking of.
That actually might be Isaiah 52, just one chapter earlier from where you were.
Well, okay. Well, let's just take these more specific claims, like the casting lots for his garments, or the fact that his hands and feet were pierced, and then he was put on a tree. So the problem is, again, they're not telling you.
Sorry. Cast lots for my garment. I found it is Psalm 22, buddy. Psalm 22, verse 18. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment.
Okay, so that's David. I assume David's writing that, or that's what we're supposed to believe, is that the psalmist David is writing this. But
it's the Psalm of David, yes. David
does not differentiate between writing about himself and his problems versus writing about a coming Messiah. Am I wrong there? Does David mention this in the context of a Messiah in the future, or is David lamenting about this happening to himself? He's imagining his enemies doing this to him.
Yeah, no, the Messianic Psalms, that's a very strange segment of prophecies that are read into the text. There's nothing indicating in any text that the writers of the Psalms had any intention of making prophetic statements about any of this. But these things happened to Jesus, and they're like, "Oh, David was prophesied, out of the blue. Who knew?"
my question for Christians is this: if David is not differentiating between, what's happening to him and a Messiah, if he doesn't mention Messiah and he doesn't explain this, then how the heck are we supposed to differentiate this ourselves?
Well, when you read
the actual author didn't explain it, so I'm putting words in the author's mouth. Like, I'm making up a story after the fact. Like, why would I interpret the author's words in a different way than he meant them? He meant this about himself. So, and the other thing is these very specific things about dividing his garment or piercing his hands and feet or putting him on a tree. You can say, well, that falls into the criteria of specificity. Sure, but it also breaks the rules of time restriction, because it was like 1,000 years later that this happened to Jesus. We have a lot of time for somebody to get nailed to a tree and his hands and feet to get pierced, and for someone to gamble over his garments. And secondly, again, this is the biggest problem with all biblical prophecies, is that we don't know that actually happened to Jesus. It simply took place inside the story. What prevents the gospel author from reading that psalm and just writing up a story to make it kind of fit? Nothing stops them from doing that. Like, this is an assumption that this actually took place.
Yep. And to use, once again, as we started out saying in the show, to use this as any sort of support that it's about God, that it validates the existence of God, is so odd because, again, even if any of this proves that Jesus was a person who fulfilled all of these prophecies, you still haven't demonstrated that it has anything to do with God or the supernatural. In what way does this prove the supernatural? It's all it would prove, even if it all went down the way we say it did, or the Christians say it did. All it proves is that some of these dudes made some predictions, albeit extremely vague, and some of them didn't mean to make predictions, apparently, like David, but somewhere in there magically just started making predictions. And some dude in the future read the Old Testament and said, hey, I can do all these things, and starts fulfilling them, even to the point of getting crucified. Okay, where does any of this have to do with God? Like, how does any of this validate the existence of God in any way, shape, or form?
Also, what's interesting is where they get the vast majority of the prophecies in the Old Testament is from poetry and allegory, and a lot of these literary devices. The Old Testament never, as far as I'm aware, specifically spells out what it means when it's prophesying about a Messiah. We get Christians saying that in the Garden of Eden there was a prophecy, in the curse, where God, you will bruise his, or he will bruise his heel, and you will crush his head, referring to the snake. And somehow they built an entire doctrine that was prophecy about the Messiah, when it never talks about the Messiah directly anywhere. And then we pull prophecies out of David's Psalms, which is essentially poetry, things that are supposed to, mean many things to many people and make you feel a certain way. Like, this is where we're getting on prophecies. Like, how about God just come down and explicitly state this through an actual prophet? Hey, my Messiah is coming. He's coming within this time period. This is where you should look for him, and this is what's going to happen to him. Like, we don't really see that anywhere. This is all massive speculation, and interpretation is absolutely required to come up with this stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of derailed you there. You were talking about this being evidence for a God.
But it's not even evidence for prophecy.
Yeah.
As we said, none of it meets the criteria. But like you said, I wish there was. But even as specific, it would have to be, dude. And like I got to tell you, even if, but it's just even if it met all the criteria to a T, and some event took place, and that was, that was it. It would prove this person prophesied whatever. I would still, in that moment, be like, okay, I still don't see how this proves the supernatural.
Right.
All we know is that somebody was able to predict this particular specific, down to the pinpoint event.
Yeah. And we don't know how.
And that's literally all we can say about it. Jumping to a conclusion is the God of the gaps. You don't have an explanation. You need an explanation. You can't live without one. So you got to say it has to be something supernatural. And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't have to be something supernatural. It might be something supernatural, but until we have any evidence that the supernatural exists, why would that be your first thought?
Yeah. So our first, I mean, if we had a situation like that, my first assumption or my first hypothesis would be that they are a really good mentalist. They're a magician who pulled off some kind of elaborate trick, because we have lots of precedent for this happening. If you've ever gone to a mentalist show or watched somebody get taken up on stage and hypnotized, or they can prophesy what's going to appear in your wallet with certain words written on it, and somehow they pull this stuff off.
Yep.
I have no idea how, but it's spectacular.
But
so I would first assume that
they admit that they're being deceptive on purpose.
Yeah. if they were to lie, if a mentalist was to lie and say that they're actually they're supernatural and they're pulling off a real magic from God, like there would be very little we could do to prove that wrong if we don't know exactly what they're doing, because they're really good at what they do. So my first assumption would be that this prophet has pulled off some kind of elaborate trick. And then secondly, if that didn't play out, I would say, well, perhaps they have access to some kind of advanced technology that I'm not aware of. Maybe they have a quantum computer and they have used it to predict the future in a very accurate way. Or maybe on the extreme end of the spectrum, perhaps they're a time traveler. Like there's no way for me to falsify that. Like I don't know. And the next hypothesis that I would have for how it's done is I don't know. The last thing I'm going to inject is this is actual magic or this is an actual God doing this. Like that's the most extreme hypothesis, the most unlikely thing based on the world that we know and observe.
Well, because it requires a whole other set of standards and rules and beliefs.
It requires a hidden world all around us of invisible beings and forces that we cannot observe or experience. Like that, it's the most unlikely hypothesis.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So let me first say, when I was a Christian, obviously I bought hook, line, and sinker that these prophecies were real and that they happened and they proved God and all this and that. Obviously, they weren't strong enough to keep me in the faith. If there was something to this, I would still be a Christian. There clearly wasn't anything substantial to my belief that these prophecies were real, because that, if they were, that would literally be enough to keep me in, honestly. But they're not. So that's the first thing. But second thing is, it is interesting to me that Christians accept all the prophecies written in this book, this Iron Age book, right? And just say, no, they happened because the Bible said they happened. We don't actually experience real miracles today. Those who claim they do, I have not seen them personally. Maybe they're happening, but for some reason, nobody ever seems to want to invite me to these things. I'd like to see a miracle. I'd like to see a prophecy. I'd like to see this stuff happen. But Christians won't believe anybody else, any other religion, any other prophet, any other miracle worker, because they're not Christians. If they're not, if it's not about Jesus, then it's false. By what criteria are you determining that those prophecies and those miracles are false, but yours are true?
By faith,
right?
Your favorite thing,
and by faith, and it's literally your faith is the only thing you can trust is the Bible. That's what you mean by faith. Like somebody else can have faith for the same exact reason you have faith, but your faith is exclusionary. It is faith is only faith. If faith is only genuine faith, if it's the faith that I think is that I believe in. Like
or one of their favorite excuses when they run out of other reasons is they will blame that other religion and that other pagan prophet's success on supernatural deception and the devil. Like, well, there are other forces in the world besides God, doing things in other religions to make it look legit. So, maybe it's just demonic activity giving that holy man some sort of divine insight.
Right.
So there's an infinite number of excuses if you dig hard enough.
Oh, absolutely. So, obviously it has been a while since Ellie and I have been in the Christian faith and have put a lot of effort into studying the Bible. I just don't anymore. I spent 42 years of my life like just pouring into it, and I don't have the stomach or the inclination or the desire whatsoever to even flip the pages open. Honestly, it just bores me tremendously, and I have mad respect for atheists who are like really dig hard and help people understand the Bible. I just can't, because it's already taken so much of my life away from me that I have a hard time even caring. So
there are many better books to read with your time.
Yeah, that's the way I feel. Clearly, though, so we aren't as prepared to discuss all the prophecies in the Bible. We went to Isaiah 53, and so what? It's been a while since we looked at it. But the point is, in the worst case scenario you guys have, none of the prophecies were fulfilled, right? And if that were the worst case scenarios, nullifying your proof of whatsoever that God exists or whatever, that would be the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, every prophecy in the Bible came true. All of it is true. And there's nothing that has failed in any way, shape, or form that meets all the criteria, whatever. Even in that best case scenario, as Elliot and I have said, that still doesn't help you demonstrate the supernatural. It just means that somewhere along the line, some people have figured out how to make prophecies, and we don't know how they do it yet. And we have to work to figure that out, if any of that were actually true. So prophecy does nothing to validate or support Christianity. It just doesn't.
Yeah. Now, there is one more aspect of prophecy that we do have to cover, because I'm sure if any Christians are watching this, they're thinking this right now. Prophecy falls into two categories. Now, so far, we've only talked about the one category, which is past prophecy, where its fulfillment is within the scriptures. There's another category of prophecy, which is future prophecies that are written in the Bible about what is still to come. And, you know, if past prophecy is used to demonstrate the supernatural of God and that the Bible has divine authority, future prophecy is its obvious purpose. It couldn't fulfill that because it hasn't happened yet. So its purpose would be to let us know what is, to inform the world about what is coming. So it bears just a couple minutes of attention, I guess. What I would say to that is, you know, most of the criteria that I've stated before still applies to future prophecy. Now, for 2,000 years, Christians have read these prophecies in the New Testament specifically, more specifically Revelation, and they've tried to apply them to the world that they observe. That's 2,000 years. There's no time restriction on this because God didn't say when any of this stuff was supposed to happen. So you have no idea when. If you go long enough into the future, you're going to find some little things that seem to make sense. And the other problem is that they are extremely vague. And for example, I forget if it's in Revelation or if it's in one of the epistles, but it says in the future there will be wars and rumors of wars. And I hear this all the time, you know, in the modern age of Christians saying, well, this is fulfilled prophecy because there are wars and rumors of wars, you know, all over the world right now. Like, okay, when has there not been? Every point in history, not just in the last 2,000 years since that prophecy was written, but in all of human history, when has there not been wars or rumors of wars? And the rumor part is weird because, you know, in the ancient world, when this was actually written, this prophecy was written, that would have made sense that there are rumors of wars because back then information didn't travel very fast and it wasn't extremely reliable. So a lot of things that you are going to hear are going to be rumors. But today, when information travels at the speed of light, we have a pretty damn good idea what's going on in the world at any given time. I mean, you just go to Google or you know, go to the news and type in war and hit enter, and you're going to get you're going to get an exact tally of every war that's currently taking place. It's not a freaking rumor. Okay, you got to put that thing in the context of when it was written. We don't have rumors of wars. We have wars. So that prophecy is already incorrect in a way.
So,
but it applies. That statement applies universally. It's a vague prophecy. It's been true for 2,000 years. Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in because, and I'm just going to make a comment to my full preterist companions. That's one of the reasons I became a full preterist, because none of the time statements or the predictions were able to go beyond 70 AD. Because even though I still don't think the predictions fit the prophecy stipulations, because saying this generation, soon, near, that's still not specific enough to be a fulfilled prophecy. To say this generation, okay, great, 40 years is an awful long time for something random to just kind of happen and make, you know, be fulfilling the prophecy. But so wars and rumors of wars, even if you still place them at a time prior to, you know, the information age that we have, it's still vague because rumors of wars were taking place all the time. It wasn't like a big shock. Wars were always happening. It was hard to walk out your door and not see a war, especially if you're living in
Yeah.
Jerusalem in that time climate where Rome and Israel or Jerusalem were fighting constantly. So to the full preterist, yeah, okay, great. You managed to squeeze everything into that first century because in no way, shape, or form do the time texts and the audience relevance allow you to escape that. This is why I was a full preterist, because it doesn't make any sense. 2,000 years is ridiculous. Like, it's just absurd that we're still waiting on Jesus to come back. And every generation, there are prophecy experts in every generation that knows how ridiculous and ludicrous this is. And that's demonstrated and evidenced by the fact that they're making predictions for their generation every single generation. And they're saying, oh, look, it's happening now. It's like, well, why do you think that? Because obviously you think this generation is your generation. So it's like always being predicted that it's going to happen soon. Soon never freaking comes. At what point does soon stop being soon? It's absurd to say that your soon now is the same as their soon then when they said it, but soon for you is literally your generation, but soon for them was 2,000 years. That's nonsense. So full preterism is the only logical interpretation of the text, but there are so many other problems with full preterism as we.
Well, I just want to, to be fair, I want to say that, in my opinion, I haven't looked at any statistics, but just is my read on the average Christian is that most Christians, especially average Christians, are not preterists, and they do believe that the Book of Revelation is for the future.
Correct.
It's very rare that I'll meet a preterist of any kind, whether it's partial or full. So to speak to them, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work for either one, but at least the preterists have a post hoc rationalization of why it could work in some world.
And there's plenty of other, when you go the full preterist route, which, by the way, those of you who are watching who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a Latin word that just means past fulfilled. Full preterists believe that all the prophecies were fulfilled by the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And so they take care of all the time tax and the audience relevance. But for you who don't believe that, and you're still a futurist waiting on the coming of Jesus, please take into consideration what I just said a few minutes ago. If you're in the first century, and you're told this generation, none of these things will pass until this generation, with beyond this, how do you say, all these things will take place in this generation, right? Or some of you standing here will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming soon. So, or even just the more generic ones like soon, near, at hand, stuff like that. If when you're reading that text, let's just take a generic one like soon, you are today anticipating the impending coming of Jesus because the Bible says it's going to happen soon. And you think soon means literally soon. You're expecting it any minute now. If that's what that word means, then that's what that word meant 2,000 years ago when it was originally penned. So if you think soon means literally any minute now, don't you think that's what they thought it meant as well? And if that's what they thought it meant as well, then that is a failed prophecy.
So this is something that not a lot of Christians realize, unless maybe they're Bible scholars, maybe they're not, maybe they haven't made the connection. But Peter talks about the last days. But by the time we get to the epistle, one of John's epistles, which is written much later, the assumption is that by that time Peter was dead, Paul was dead, and John was the last apostle writing things to the early church. John changes it. He doesn't refer to the last days. He says we are in the last hour.
Yeah.
If it was actually the Apostle John writing that, which I doubt, but let's pretend that it was, because you, as a Christian, you believe that. John had watched the deaths of all the other apostles. He was the last one standing. He knew that they had to be not in the last days anymore, but in the very last hour, because he would have been guaranteed to be alive before. Or at the time of Jesus' return. So even the Apostle John knew that it was about to happen. This was it. This was the end. I'm dying. I'm getting old. I was watching everyone else die. This has to happen. So if Scripture is divinely inspired and God put those words in his mouth, why would God tell John to write the last hour instead of the last days, as Peter and Paul referenced?
Correct. these are all the problems that futurism has, which is why most of those of us who went to full preterism, we're just like, wow, it was like an awakening of its own. It's like, whoa, how did we miss these all these years? Well, it's because there's so many problems with the full preterist interpretation that are beyond the time texts and the audience relevance and stuff. So you continuously have the Christians anticipating a future coming, because it's like, well, not everything actually does fit this framework. There are problems. And so they either way, you're wrong about something, because the Bible just doesn't make sense one way or the other. Something is going to conflict, and you just got to basically pick your poison. Are you going to be ignorant to the audience relevance and the time text and pretend like you're not reading somebody else's mail when you actually are? Or are you going to stay within your framework of full preterism and ignore the fact that everything's been fulfilled, and yet nothing was fulfilled in tangible reality? It's just quite literally all based on faith. All of your benefits are faith-based. Everything you received as a result of what Jesus did by his second coming in Jerusalem and destroying Jerusalem is literally something that is intangible, and you just believe it because you're told you have them. How do you know you have the Holy Spirit? What does that even look like? How do you know you have the fruit of the Spirit? What does that even look like? Like, what is the peace that passes all understanding? Like, what does that look like? You as Christians, you act like you have these special things, and you point to Christians and non-Christians and say, oh, they don't have that peace. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been on both sides, and I can tell you right now, I have more peace now than I ever did as a Christian. I have more hope in general as a being looking forward to life. My outlook in life is better than it ever has been when I was a Christian.
Yeah.
You go to funerals, and I've heard when I was a Christian, the big thing was, oh, we have, Paul talks about, those who only hope in this life, they are most to be pitied, right? And so we would say, oh, see, non-Christians, they can't rejoice at a funeral. They can't have hope that they'll see the loved ones, and they're just miserable, and their funerals are different. And they're all, I don't know what you're talking about. You're taught these things. You're told these things are true, but you don't know that they're true because you don't actually go to secular funerals. Maybe you do, but most of you don't. And we don't actually experience what life is like as an unbeliever. And you think these things because you're fed them, but they are just not true. We as non-Christians are not like walking around like in just despair and agony because of death. It sucks. Death is horrible no matter who you are, but you just face the reality that it is what it is. You lost somebody, you go through the grief, and then you realize life's that's it, and you move on. That's what you have to do. You're forced to. But as a Christian, you hang on to this hope. And anyway, it's all nonsensical. It's all based on faith, and it isn't reality. There, that's my sermon.
That was an excellent monologue. No, you're touching on something that I like to call the problem of Christians, and I think it would make an excellent topic for another week, because I have a lot of material to address that specifically. But I would just say that coming out of Christianity, I identified what I believe were 20 different category problems for Christianity that could not be solved. And one of those problems for me was the problems of Christians and how they're not special, and they're not set apart, and you can't tell that the gospel has any specific power if you just examine Christians as a group, or even break them down into subgroups. Like, any way you want to cut it, statistically or anecdotally, like your Christians themselves are a problem for Christianity. But I don't want to get too deep into that. My phone just told me that my battery's dying, so I have limited time here.
Okay, that's all right. We'll go ahead and call it quits. I think we've beat this horse dead pretty well. So
yeah.
But it was fun. It's fine. I mean, we had a good time. We talked a little bit about prophecy, and we'll be more prepared for other stuff in the future. Some things we will be, some things we won't. Like I said, the Bible is just like not exciting to me anymore.
I'm winging it because like I think up the topic like the day before, and like I'll just do that, because in the past I was like really well educated on these things when I was coming out of Christianity, and
sure.
So I'm still in that mindset that I have the knowledge, even though I've probably forgotten a lot of it. So I kind of shoot myself in the foot.
If I cared, I would get back into it and it would all come back to me, but I just don't. So that's that. But when I was writing my book, I was really into it. So I was studying, and so it's all in there. If you care what used to be in here, read my book. And I think the same for you.
Yeah.
But that being said, next Sunday, the 23rd, we are having another special guest, Josh Patterson, from Rethinking Faith. I think the last time I said it was Rethinking Christianity. I apologize. I had that incorrect. It's Rethinking Faith. And he is what's known as a process theologian. That was the other word I was trying to remember last episode, and I couldn't. So he is a process theologian. So he's going to come on, and we're going to have a great conversation with him. It's going to be interesting. He has, I've had him on my show, The Unraveler. I've been on his show. We've dialogued before. Some days he's an atheist. Some days he's not. He's very interesting. But in my mind, his Christianity is just whatever he wants it to be. And he must have some reasons. And that's what we're going to talk to him about. I'm very interested in continuing to press him a little bit, figure out where he's coming from. And I'm sure he'll press back as well and give us questions. And I'm happy with that too. So as atheists, we're going to talk to a process theologian who is a Christian, who has his version of Christianity. And so that'll be an interesting conversation. Anyway, so that's 23rd at 2 p.m. And other than that, join us at Deconversion Nation. Come on over at Facebook, Deconversion Nation. We'd love to have you over there to dialogue about some things, throw your questions, throw your comments, especially if you're a Christian. That's the right place for you to come and ask your questions. We hope you come there and dialogue with us. Otherwise, drop a comment. Please like, subscribe, but liking is key because it helps YouTube know that this is something people should watch. And we really appreciate your help in that way. So I think that's it. Anything else, Elliot, you can think of?
Well, that'll do.
All right. We are the Deconversionists, hopefully taking the con out of your conversion. Everybody,